Hello, Ian. Nice to see you from New York.
Hi from York.
Okay. It's very nice to have you join us today. And I believe our audience are looking forward to hearing stories about your project and to learn from your experiences. But before the interview, I would suggest we introduce ourselves in a few words. So I could start first. My name is Hong Xizhao, Program Manager of World Monuments Fund, headquartered in New York and with affiliate office worldwide. And WF is an international nonprofit organization dedicated to safeguarding treasured places in the world.
Thank you. So my name is Ian Milstead. I'm the head of community engagement at York Archaeological Trust. York Archaeological Trust is a charity. It's an educational charity. Has been established since 1972. It undertakes archaeological research. It delivers commercial archaeological services within the UK planning system. It runs 5 visitor attractions, including the Jorvik Viking Centre, which is well known outside of the UK. And it also has an extensive programme of engagement activities from our education department, exhibitions department, and the engagement department, which is the one I'm running.
Great. Thank you. So now we have a couple questions and we want to learn more about your program. So we actually very interested in your program about archaeology on prescription. So could you briefly introduce it to us?
Yes, very happily. So archaeology on prescription is it's a social prescribing project. Social prescribing is also known in the UK as green prescribing. It's not a new concept. It's been around for a while. The idea is that it's a way of providing access to sociable activities for people who are suffering from mental health illnesses or crises, or who need to support in other ways. It's often associated with outdoor activities. It's often associated with gardening or with conservation work and nature work. And we felt that the practice of archaeological field work would fit well into that model. So we proposed that as a way of going ahead. So we have access to a small site in the historic city of York, which is a city with Roman origins, has been occupied ever since. So it expands the whole of the last 2 millennia of history from the UK. So it has a lot of very good archaeological resource available. We run a small excavation with a limited number of participants in every session so that we can maintain good staff ratios. And the whole point is that they're there for a social experience. They're there to improve their confidence. They're there to contribute positively to their well-being through the practice of archaeology. They're not there to learn how to become an archaeologist. However, if they want to learn more about that, then we facilitate that. But the primary purpose is that they're there for their own benefit and their own well-being, which sets it apart from most community engagement projects.
Understood. Thank you. It's great to know more about it. So could you spend a bit more time to introduce about this program's rationale, the goals, objectives, and your strategic approaches?
Yes, no, absolutely. So as an educational trust, achieving public benefit through access to heritage and archaeology is one of our key tenets. It's the core of our strategic program. So this project is an important part of that, and really it was informed by consultation across the heritage sector, both in New York and in the UK, with a growing interest in the potential role of heritage in contributing to public well-being. These thoughts were brought into a lot more focus during the pandemic, during the COVID-19 pandemic, when in liaison with bodies in the city of York who monitor public health, it was quite clear that, perhaps unsurprisingly, the impact on public health had been very severe, and there was a need for more opportunity for people to re-socialize, to sort of re-emerge into the world, as it were. So it provided an additional focus to us. So we worked very closely with the authorities in York and with the health authorities to align our project with their strategic aims for public health, which are largely around well-being, around improved social connection, and improved confidence. So those were at the heart of what we tried to do. So we, as an objective, we didn't set sort of numerical objectives. We wanted to see if we could reach as broad a range of people as we could. So one of our aims was to be as diverse as possible. And that was underpinned by a general mindset of wanting to look at removing or at least reducing barriers to participation in heritage, whether they be social or economic or demographic or educational barriers, but also barriers to do with health inequality and in particular poor mental health. So that was at the core. I think broadly we've achieved this, and we've achieved it through concentrating on the accessibility angle. So we've taken as much of our practice as we could, taken it and broken it down into a series of very accessible, manageable individual tasks. We've ensured that the supervision levels are high, but we don't, what's the word? But the purpose of their being there is not to undertake the activity. The purpose of their being there is to be there, which might sound a little bit philosophical, but in essence, if they arrive, they have a hot drink, a cup of tea, they have a conversation with someone, and they leave, and they come back the following week and do the same thing. That's terrific. The achievement there is that they've come back again. Yeah. If after undertaking some archaeological activity, they want to start to learn more about that and they want to engage with it more closely, then we can facilitate that. And that's also an achievement, but that's not our primary goal.
Understood. Great. I know this is a very successful and award-winning program. So do you think what would the particular qualities and the innovations of this program?
I think the key quality for us is the staff who deliver this program. So I have a very talented and experienced staff team who are drawn from a range of different practice backgrounds, and I think that's really important. So in the core of my team are archaeologists. I'm an archaeologist. That's my background in field archaeology. But alongside those colleagues, we also have museum and heritage professionals from our organization who have much greater expertise in evaluation and in audience research. And most importantly, I think we also include staff whose primary expertise is in public-facing delivery. So people from our education team, from our attractions teams, who are used to that communication task, who are very used to dealing with a wide range of abilities and expectations. So it's that combination of that group as a single team, I think, is one of the real keys to our success. And I think the innovation really is in the focus on accessibility, but it's in the willingness to take an activity that might seem on the face of it quite inaccessible and say, let's work with you to find a way that you can access this. So we're very strongly influenced by the environmental model of disability rather than the medical model. So our focus is not that the individual is the one with a problem. The focus is what is wrong with the environment that doesn't allow that individual to fully engage with it. So in the spirit of that mindset, we work with individual potential participants to show them what the offer is, and then to understand their needs better and to work with them to design solutions. So whether that's additional assistance to go into a trench or always having activities available that don't require physically being in the trench itself. So sit-down activities, finds washing, research online, making sure that there's always something meaningful that any participant can take part in. And most importantly, that it's all done together as a team. And that's the key element for us. Archaeology is inherently only about people. It's the study of people by people, and it's inherently team-based. So we don't want to make people feel that they're not part of the group. So everything they do is meaningful, and and makes a visible contribution to the overall effort.
Brilliant. So speaking of the teamwork, our next question is about the staff training component. So could you please specify it and tell us how it benefit to this program?
It's a really important question, this, because from the very beginning, we were very clear that our staff are archaeologists or museum and heritage professionals. None of us is a clinician. None of us, we're not doctors, we're not care workers, we're not counselors, and we're certainly not psychologists. So we have to be very aware of our professional limits and our professional boundaries. That's the key thing. So to support our staff, primarily, we delivered a lot of awareness training of different access needs, from including physical mobility through to neurodiversity, through to learning difficulties, through to people with anxiety disorders, to help us have a greater awareness of how their appreciation of the world might be and how things that may look accessible to one person may not be that accessible to another. We also focused strongly on the mental health support aspect. So alongside being first aid trained, all of our staff are also mental health first aid trained, which is as much to help them feel prepared to deal with an emergency, also to be more aware of their own mental health and to practice self-reflection for their own well-being. After a year of delivering this very successfully, we consulted really closely with the staff, and it was quite clear that they needed greater support in order to feel secure, in order also that we knew we were providing as safe an environment as we possibly could. So to that end, we've invested heavily in making sure that we all have training in maintaining professional boundaries. We have specific training in having difficult conversations. And we've also ensured that we build reflective practice into the working day of the staff as much as into the experience of our participants. So to that end, we've commissioned an external organisation to undertake a monthly supervision session with our staff to provide them with a forum to discuss in more detail some of the things they may have encountered during a session. We also build time into the paid working day for them to debrief and decompress and reflect on their experience, so that they don't feel like they're having to take that home with them, which is really, really important. And I think the other really important thing is that in our sort of terms of reference when we're engaging with the NHS or with social prescribers, we're very clear about what we are and are not able to provide. And we make absolutely sure that any participant is well aware of this, and we make space for them to bring their own support with them if that's what they need. So we feel really strongly that this is critical, not just to delivering a safe environment for your participants who are vulnerable people by definition, but it's also extremely important to recognise the well-being needs of your staff, especially as many of them, like most people do, have at the very least second-hand experience of mental health needs, and in many cases have personal lived experience as well. And we have to be aware that they don't exist within a bubble. They are part of that group, and we need to make sure they're looked after.
Yeah, indeed. That's really the key to the success of this project. So next question is about the evaluation. We know it's also a very important part of this program. So could you specify the evaluation from CRT Search and your internal evaluation using the UCL well-being umbrellas? And yes, what are your indicators?
Okay, no, it's a really important point. So before I go into the specifics of those two elements that we chose, I think it's important to start with what we chose not to use. So we in consultation with colleagues elsewhere in the sector, we were advised strongly to avoid evaluation techniques that were overtly medicalized. And the challenge we found quite quickly in the process was that there is no bespoke model of evaluation that maps conveniently and fluently onto this sort of project. And this is a common issue that we've encountered across social prescribing as we've engaged with colleagues in social prescribing, both regionally and nationally, that the two sort of strands, the quantitative and the qualitative strand, are quite difficult to design to measure something as relatively ephemeral as well-being. There is no simple numerical way of measuring that. Now, the one tool that a lot of people would suggest is something called the Warwick-Edinburgh Scale, which is used by medical professionals to assess people for anxiety and depression. And we did not feel qualified to use that tool because we're not clinicians. So we fell back instead on an existing tool that has an overt well-being focus that still has a numerical component. So UCL, University College London, have developed a series of what they call well-being umbrellas, which is a circular disc with a colored hexagonal diagram, each segment of which is divided into a different characteristic. So they produce positive characteristics and negative characteristics. We went with the positive ones to start with because we felt that we didn't want to reinforce negativity. So those positive attributes are things like, do you feel active? Do you feel alert, enthusiastic, excited, happy, or inspired? And these have a scale from 1, which is low, to 5, which is high. And then we ask people to complete these at the beginning and the end of the session, or complete them on their first week and then halfway through and then at the end of their time. So we can see whether there is a trend emerging of an increase in any of those strands, or whether there's no perceivable impact. And there's quite a lot of documentation that comes with these from UCL that sort of allows you to understand what it's telling you. And by and large, we decided that they were being very helpful. We could see clear improvements in trends throughout the program. There would be a bit of a drop off, and then if they came back again, it would come up again. But it is quite limited. So this year we've experimented with taking the data more often. So we do it every session rather than every other week. The danger of this is that you overload the form filling element. So there's always a balance to be struck. And we don't know where that balance is, and we're still trying to test and see what works best. Now, with CERT, they're called CERT. They are an organization based at the University of York St John, which is an academic institution of York, and they are a separate charity. So their primary purpose is to provide access to university quality courses for people who have experienced mental health needs. And they provided a lot of our initial participants. They were one of our project partners. And quite a lot of the people who attend their courses were introduced to us and attended our courses. And CERT is their organization that takes their participants with most experience and trains them to evaluate those experiences. So we thought, well, that was a really interesting model. So we invited them in to undertake evaluation of our winter program, which is our creative arts indoors-based program that we run over the winter when we can't access the site. And using a series of semi-structured interviews during work and questionnaires, they were able to engage with participants as a neutral third party and elucidate a little bit more information, a bit more personal information. And from that, we learned that a lot of what we were doing well centered around consistency of staffing, and that accessibility mindset. People felt very welcomed. They didn't feel intimidated, which is really important to us. But it also highlighted that we needed to capture that qualitative testimony in slightly greater detail. So with that knowledge, we are now trying different ways to capture testimony, both from participants, but also from their families and from their support workers. And we're doing these in a variety of ways. So it's either done formally through a focus group, or it's done less formally through mood boards, or having sketch pads or notebooks, or one other activity is they write a postcard, or write a little letter to themselves at the start about their expectations. And then at the end, they review that and write a letter to their previous selves to tell them how they've changed. So it's a lot more reflexive and it's a lot more personal. And it's still quite early in that process, but we're getting some very good results back from that. And most importantly, we're getting really positive feedback about that from the participants. They enjoy doing that. It doesn't feel like an imposition, and it doesn't detract from their experience, which is really, really important to us. Mm-hmm. So coming back to why we didn't use those medicalized models, we know from working with people that they feel they're very triggering. They remind them of illness and of a problem. And that's not what we're there to do. The last thing we want to do is cause more harm, which is why we avoided those methods.
That's really brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all this background of the program with us. I believe our audience, including myself today, would learn a lot from your endeavors. So we still have 30 seconds left. So if you have anything you want to share with our audience, yes, you have the floor.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to speak. It's great to be able to share. And I look forward to seeing the submissions from other interviewees as well, because, we can always learn. And I think that's the point to make about our next steps, is that we're very aware that, we've had a degree of success and we're proud of that, but we know what there are areas we can improve in. And in particular, we want to look at how people finish their time in our program and move on in a positive way to greater self-realization, greater sort of access to other opportunities. So we're looking at developing volunteering opportunities within our own organization, but also learning what else is available out there beyond our own organization so we can signpost people on to other opportunities elsewhere. And we've had a degree of success with that already, but there's much more work to be done. The other aspect is we want to really work on capturing co-creation, particularly creative work, not just into the output of what people are doing, but also into the design of the program itself. So we're starting to design ways where previous participants can help us design the delivery program, and then in many ways actually present it almost as sort of peer-to-peer mentoring way and have an influence on how the program is shaped as a legacy of their time being involved with it. And we feel that's much more powerful for people as giving them a tangible legacy of having contributed something, as well as having not consumed, but having been there and received. And this reflects a lot of commentary we get with people saying that they've had a really good time, they feel like they've made great progress, but they want to contribute, they want to leave a mark, they want to help pass it on to the next person. And so it's finding a way to help them be part of that, I think, is really important. And the last point is sustainability, because a lot of these projects are grant funded, and we're funded by the National Heritage Lottery Fund, which is fantastic. It's a very, very valuable funding stream. And without it, we couldn't operate. But for funding in the long term, we need to engage more with our professional health services so that social prescribing is part of their core health delivery service. And to that end, we need to work with colleagues in the sector to advocate for this as a process. So not just our own practice, but social prescribing in general. And that means communicating, sharing best practice, learning from one another, and making the case for the positive impact that this can have so that it becomes accessible to a wider range of people, which is the ultimate goal.
That's great. Thank you, Ian, for joining us today and for sharing your stories. And I wish you very best and the continued success of your program in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.